Hey everybody, I'm Aura Johnson and I am a senior programmer here at the Ashland Independent Film Festival. And this is the Q&A for the short documentary program called Land. And I think what we'll do to begin is just go around. We're missing one of our directors today, but we have 3 out of 4, so that's pretty good. And all women, which is awesome. So maybe we can just go around and introduce ourselves and say which film is yours, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, I'm Emily Harrold. I'm the producer director of the film MELTDOWN in Dixie, which is about a Confederate flag flying, actually I'll lean, flying outside of an ice cream shop in my hometown in Orangeburg, South Carolina. And I'm super excited to be here virtually and really excited to discuss all these great films.
So my name is Aylin. I'm the director of Spirits and Rocks and AZOREAN MYTH. And I'm calling you from Switzerland, and it's midnight here, so I hope what I'm gonna say makes sense because I'm a bit tired. But yeah, I'm also very happy to have this talk with you, and I love the films.
So Alainis Glavinitis, I'm the filmmaker of Only the Earth and the Mountains. It talks about the kind of buried history of the Sand Creek Massacre, which happened in 1864, where Colorado troops massacred a peaceful village of Cheyenne and Arapaho people. And it's a history that's been swept under the rug for hundreds, since it happened over 150 years ago. So the film is about how this kind of forgotten history continues to impact people today, both the descendants of the victims and the descendants of the perpetrators.
Hey, as long as we're with you, let's talk about your film for a minute. I guess what I'd love to hear from all of you is just how you came to this story and how you decided to pursue that story. And so let's hear from you, because your film is really unique in that it opens with a Native man's voice that we get to listen to. And I think most Americans are not even familiar with the native tongue of our own country. And so anyway, tell us more about that.
Well, so I grew up in Colorado, in Denver, and growing up, I remember learning about pioneer history and this kind of epic story of manifest destiny and the settlement of the West. What I didn't learn about was the Cheyenne and Arapaho people on whose land I lived and went to school on, and on, this is where the city is, etc., where I live. So when I kind of found out about this history about, as an adult and as a filmmaker, and I was interested in looking more into it as a citizen and just knowing, it was a very shocking thing to find out that something so, it was a very big event historically, and that something so big and so terrible could be all but forgotten and be something that we weren't taught in schools, for example. So I started researching it, and I started to think that maybe I could make a film about it. I reached out to, and I had read a lot about it. The tribes have descendants representatives who come to represent the tribes for different events around Sand Creek, commemorations and memorializations, which happen a little bit more and more. And so I had reached out to them and started talking to the descendants, and it was just a process of meeting people and talking to people and starting conversations.
How about you, Emily? How did you come to your story?
So I grew up, so this is the ice cream shop in question. If I lean, I'm very into this background right now. I grew up about 10 minutes that way. So yeah, this is a story that's based in my hometown. And the Confederate flag at this specific location has been there most of my life. And it was something that, everybody saw and knew it was there. And when the ice cream shop moved in, everybody just assumed that he was on board with keeping it up. But after the Charleston massacre in 2015, the owner, a guy named Tommy, basically went public with the fact that he didn't want the flag there anymore. And it was a big revelation because nobody in town realized that the plot of land where the flag is actually owned by an organization called the Sons of Confederate Veterans. And so they are the ones that are flying the flag. And so it became this kind of local battle that was getting a little bit of news attention, but not a ton. And being from there, I just thought it was a really interesting, you know, it was a local story that's playing out in my hometown, but it's a larger issue that we're dealing with kind of across the country. And so I think whenever you start a documentary, you're very naive. You're just kind of jumping in. So I very naively called them up and was like, oh, let's, start filming. And 3 years later, we finished the film.
Awesome. Thank you. And Aylin, your film is a little bit different from theirs because yours is dealing with mythology and folklore. And I'm curious about, how did you come to your story? And did you go to visit the island to shoot the film, or do you live there, or how did you come to your story? It's like a different variation on this theme of land.
Yeah, for me it was very different because I made it as part of my master's program. And so it was a mobile school and we moved to another country every semester. And the last semester I was in Portugal. I was looking for an interesting relationship between landscapes and people because it's something I really like to explore also in my previous works. And I don't remember. I think I was Googling some photos and trying to find something interesting visually, and this mountain appeared, and I don't know, it had some attraction on me, and I felt like I had to go and see. So I bought my tickets the same day to go there, and I didn't shoot anything the first 2 times I went there, only the third time. Before that, I was just spending time with people and trying to learn about the culture and the history and all these stories, myths and legends. Yeah, so that's a bit
you said something in your cover letter. And by the way, I love cover letters, as I don't know if all programmers do, but I personally love reading cover letters. But you said in your something about collective memory, and I loved that notion. And can you speak a little bit more about that idea of collective memory?
I think that in my film's case, it's about collective memory. It's also about collective traumatic experiences that they all went through. And so I wanted to make a film that will connect all these people through this collective history, but also the same landscapes that they inhabit. And yeah, so I was more interested in this collective history than the individual ones. Yeah.
So my next question is for all of you. And so if whoever wants to pipe up first, just go for it. But I'm always curious to ask people how you gain the trust of the people that you're working with, especially when you're dealing with things that are so tender or so passionate with people, how you got the people to feel comfortable with you and sharing their story, because there's a lot of charged stuff with all of these stories, so I'm curious about that. Does anybody want to speak?
I can.
Okay, great.
I have a very quick answer, actually. So like I said, the last semester we had the choice to go back to one of the countries that we visited before. And I chose Portugal because it was really easy, actually. I think people were very open to be filmed. They were even enjoying it. It's something I struggled a bit more in Belgium and Hungary, where I was before. So yeah, I chose Portugal because I knew that I would have to film many people. I had this idea of making this collective film from the beginning, and yeah, for me, that was-
How about you, Elleni?
Yeah, am I muted? No, okay.
You're good.
It takes, I guess what I realized in making this film, because it's not my story, it's also a collective story, and collective memory is also something that I thought about a lot in making the film. And the only way to really talk about Sand Creek is to talk about it through the perspectives of the descendants of its victims, the people who carry sort of the trauma, this historical trauma with them. And they've carried it for generations, and they'll carry it forward. So it's a matter of taking a lot of time to talk to people and learning along the way. I think kind of learning from some mistakes, and also kind of being very open and really just taking time. I mean, most of the conversations that I had really happened off camera. So it's kind of, there's a whole lot of work behind that happens before you get to the part where you're actually sitting down and doing an interview.
That's a tricky thing, isn't it? When you're off camera and you're making that connection. And I'm sure you had a bunch of times when you wish that you were rolling, but it wasn't time yet to roll.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's, I privilege in making this film the people that I'm talking to even more than the film itself and the story itself. So, I mean, I try to kind of, let that go too. I mean, there are many things where there's so many times when I could have filmed something and it would have been a lovely thing to film, but you kind of let that go and kind of go with what you have and where you get to when you get to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about you, Emily? How did you get everybody to trust you when you're dealing with kind of both sides of such an intense issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think openness, like Alani said, is really important. And access was a big part of this film, and I knew that going into it as well. I think at a very base level, the fact that I was born and raised in the town where I was filming helped a lot. On the side of the ice cream shop, I actually had made a film with a colleague of Justin's, who's the lawyer with the ice cream shop. And so they knew my work, and that helped very much so with that side of things. And with the Sons of Confederate Veterans, it was one of those things where I really had no idea if they were going to be comfortable participating. And really, I could have made the film. I'm a progressive. I don't want the flag there. And so I could have very much made the film just about the ice cream shop. But I realized that to some extent that would just be preaching to the choir. And that while I did live in this town where the issue of the Confederate flag is still very emotionally wrought, I hadn't really talked to anyone that really strongly believe that it should be up, just because I think we exist in our own echo chambers that we build. And so I thought I should just reach out and see, and, be open and honest about the fact that I just wanted to have a dialogue. And I think honestly, Buzz Braxton just wanted the opportunity to be heard. I think he often felt like he was painted in a very specific light, and that he didn't get the chance to talk. And so I was just very honest with him from the get-go, I don't agree with you, but I think we need to be talking. I don't think we should just, completely exist in completely separate echo chambers. And so that was the whole part, the whole thing, the whole relationship was just predicated on that we need to be having conversations. And, you're constantly negotiating access, right? So it's constantly a conversation. And ultimately, I mean, I'm really grateful that everyone participated, that everyone sat down and spoke, because again, I think we've existed in these separate rooms on this issue for too long, and obviously it's not helped. So
Yeah, good for you. It does feel like people were very frank, and they seem to feel really comfortable talking about their point of view with that, for sure. Yeah. Another thing that strikes me is all of you in making films that have a relationship to land is just like the look and the framing that you chose when you were shooting. And I'm curious to hear about those choices. I know with only, sorry, I was like only the earth and the mountain. All of a sudden my brain went blank on the title of your film, but I remember that there's a lot of really nice wide shots that really give you perspective around where we are. And that was just so beautiful. And I'm just curious if everybody wanted to talk a little bit about the looks that you went with your film. Do you want to start since I was just talking about yours?
Sure. Yeah, I was inspired by, landscape photography, and I wanted to really give a sense of the place and kind of what it looks like and what it feels like. Because so much of this history, you can read it in the land, you can read it in the built environment. So I'm really interested in how these kind of historical things are transcribed in the physical world, and how when we pay attention to these signs, I mean, you might not notice them right away, but when you start to learn about, say, a history like this or something, you start to see all of these signs kind of around you, and you start to make this meaning as an individual in a landscape. So I wanted to get to that, and to kind of this vast space of the high plains. It's massive amounts of land that were stolen from the tribes to create our states, all of the United States. So it's just I was trying to get to that, and kind of also the sense of loss that, because when I look at these lands, when I look at the landscape around the Sand Creek Massacre site, I kind of feel the loss of what was before. And, kind of there's an emptiness, but there's also, you can kind of feel, I think you just feel things, that you can kind of read things in the emptiness.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really true. Certain places have certain vibes. Absolutely. Yeah. How about you, Aylin? Your film is so striking visually. It's just gorgeous. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I think I wanted to give the same attention to the landscape, natures, the animals and people, because for me, they were all the same part of this same symphony. And that was also one of the reasons why I decided to shoot in black and white. Another reason was that it gives this sense of timelessness that I was looking for. Also because it's something I felt there. It's really, probably because of the isolation, but I really felt like I was out of time, and yeah, maybe out of this world also. So these are some the things that I wanted to convey through the cinematography. So I'm really happy that you enjoyed it. Yeah.
Cool. And then how about you, Emily? Yours, I'm sure it was really tricky to think of aesthetically how you wanted it to look, because it was so journalistic, and so sometimes you're just grabbing a shot, for sure. But tell us about your process with that.
Sure. So we actually had multiple shooters. So I wouldn't say we had a specific look outside of, like you said, we're just trying to capture events unfolding. But it was really important to me in the color, like all of the colors are very bright. You can kind of see. And I think that has to do with because there's a very kind of dark comedy to the fact that there's an ice cream shop flying a Confederate flag. And
that the land that flag's on is tiny little itty bitty triangle.
Right. It's smaller than a bathroom, to be honest. And so we really kind of wanted to play with that, like the comedic side of it. And so we really wanted these really bright colors, really saturated colors. And that was something that we were able to do consistently, even though we did have different shooters throughout the film.
Yeah. And it makes the flag really pop, doesn't it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. The red.
Yeah, it definitely pops. You can't miss it.
Do you guys have questions for each other at all that you might want to speak to? I don't want to put you totally on the spot, but
Well, I was really, it was striking to me that, your films, as well as the third film from the director that's not here, all began with poems.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And so I was wondering, what was the motivation for each of you to start with a poem?
I think one of the reasons is this collective memory again, because it's a myth. So again, of course, it's mythology is something that all these people share. I think, I don't know, actually this poem is inspired by different stories that I heard there, but the main inspiration comes from 2 villages on the island where we shot. And people, every year, they burn rosemary on charcoal. And they really believe that these spirits that come from the volcanic rocks are going to stay away from their houses because of they're going to follow the smoke up to the mountain. So I don't know, I was so amazed by the story and by the influence that natural disasters, because actually this mythology exists because at the time people couldn't understand natural disasters. So they would see this fire coming through a mountain and they thought it was a punishment from God. So for me, it was really interesting that there are still people believing in this, and some of them maybe they don't believe in, but it's still very present in the tradition. And yeah, but I was really fascinated by this.
The poem or the words that you hear in the beginning of my film they were written by Richard Little Bear. And he is a Northern Cheyenne descendant of the massacred descendants. And so one of the things that's really important to the tribes is the preservation of language, because not only is this history that took away people's lives, but there's also a large amount of cultural a lot of cultural loss as well. And that's been made clear also in the last year with the pandemic, is that as the older people, the elders in the tribes are passing away, they're losing more and more of their fluent speakers. So there's a lot of importance in preserving the language. So as I was working on this project, I thought it was really essential to have Cheyenne or Arapaho spoken in the film. And Richard Little Bear is a writer, and he thinks he might be the only person who's writing today in the Cheyenne language. So he says that a lot of the stories that they have in Cheyenne are old stories or folklore, myths, but that he actually writes today. And he might be the only person writing today in the Cheyenne language. So he had written this piece a while ago, and he had shared it with me. And then I had the idea. I asked him if he would read it for the film, and he accepted. So, that's just like the loss of language and the loss of culture is another way that this kind of historical trauma is perpetuated and continues today.
I really enjoyed that. It was just, it's a beautiful language. It's just, the content obviously is pretty heavy, extremely heavy. But it's such a beautiful sound. It reminded me a little bit of the Hawaiian spoken language. And so I'm bummed that we didn't have our rep from This Is the Way We Rise with us today, to hear a little bit about Jamaica Poet and how they you know, do their work and see it as a form of activism, for sure. So, well, thank you so much, you guys. I think we're just about out of time, but I wanted to thank you for joining me today. And I really wish that you were all here in person where we could hang out and talk for hours and eat and drink and be merry, but maybe next year. So please keep telling stories. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining me.
Yeah,